Well, hello and welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen, the channel that brings you your team every single day, guys. Only way to make sure you always get it is hit that sub, ring that notification bell. Well, a couple of stories to bring you this evening. First of all, Rangers have confirmed their coaching staff until the end of the season. Obviously, no guarantee that will be the coaching staff on next season, but it will be here until the end of the season. We're going to talk about that. I also want to talk a little bit about what Fashion Sakala has had to say. I was actually, quite frankly, shocked to read the article, and I want to give my opinion on that and talk to you a little bit about what that tells us about what was going on at this club prior to Philippe Clement's arrival and why it should give us a new hope about these players. Well, okay, let's start off with the news that's just come out about the coaching staff. That's right. Philippe Clement has confirmed his coaching staff until the end of the season. And this is obviously the right decision, I think, to keep things as they are. And then as part of the summer rebuild, I think along with the new director of football recruitment, Niels Koppen, I think the club will undertake a root and branch overhaul of the coaching staff under Philippe's direction. But he revealed his coaching staff today. And he confirmed who was on that coaching staff and some comments as well from the people who were confirmed. So there are the coaching staff as it is confirmed till the end of the season. Now, Stefan van der Heyden, who arrived with Philippe Clement in October, will continue as his assistant manager until the end of the season, probably beyond that as well. The management team will now, it has been confirmed, be assisted by Alex Ray, former Ranger, former Millwall player, former Sunderland player. Brian Gilmore and Colin Stewart will continue in his role as goalkeeping coach, which is good news for Rangers. Some consistency there. And I think, you've obviously got to praise the work that Colin Stewart has done with Robbie McCrory and also with more recently Jack Butland as well. Good news indeed. Alex Ray spoke to the media post this announcement and post that photograph. He said, "I'm delighted to be back at Rangers for the rest of the season. Everyone knows how much this club means to me, and I'm determined to help the gaffer and Stefan bring silverware back to Rangers. We are still in 4 competitions, and we have a lot to look forward to this season." I mean, it's nice to hear Alex talk like that, isn't it? And the fact that he's a Rangers man, the fact that he understands and he loves our club so much, is what you need on that coaching staff. And hopefully, the passion, the intensity that Ray can show will hopefully pass on to the players. Ray, I remember seeing Alex Ray play as a player for Millwall, for Sunderland, and for Rangers, and he always played with passion. He always played with intensity, and he always played with an edge to his game, shall we say? And I think that's very much what you need if you're going to be a top class midfielder. And hopefully, that's something he can instill in the likes of Raskin, Jack, Lawrence, Lundstrom, Todd Cantwell, all those guys who play in and around the midfield area for Rangers. So it is very, very good news. Obviously, Alex Ray returned after a short spell with Reading FC, where he was with Paul Ince. Gilmore was someone who stepped up from the academy and will continue to do that as well. And it is very much a positive thing and a good thing that there is a consistency of approach. Philippe Clement obviously feels comfortable with these guys. He feels that they're part of the club, and they give him an insight, I think, into what was going on at the club before he came, into how the club is run, and also gives him a valuable insight into being a Rangers manager and being part of this great club of ours. So, it is very, very, very good indeed. Alex Ray went on to say, "I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of the manager's coaching staff since he took over in October. I believe working alongside him can only develop me as a coach." Brian Gilmore, so that's nice to hear him speaking so positively. Gilmore also said, "Now we are determined to bring success to the club," which is fantastic to hear the coaches all talking about success, talking about silverware, and talking about doing well in these competitions. The fact as well that Tom Taylor will later this month join the club as well as head of performance is also very good news indeed, given the fact that he's coming from Premier League Brighton, who are a pretty good club and a pretty decent club indeed. So look, it's all good news. It's all positive there on that coaching staff. And I'm glad to see the club following through with some consistency of approach there and really working this coaching staff into giving them an opportunity to prove themselves until the end of this season. Now, there was a really interesting story this morning in the media, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to really talk about it at the time because unfortunately, I was at work. I've been at work all day today. And I was quite frankly shocked by the content of what was said. And the guy who talked about it, you've got to believe what this guy tells you. He's a good Christian lad. He's an honest lad. look, I know he was someone who divided the fan base in terms of his play. There was fans who really loved Fashion, loved what he did. There's others that obviously were cross at him and angry at him because of the two misses against that lot from across the city at crucial times, and felt that he didn't, perhaps he was one of those players that at crucial times went missing. But I suppose one thing you can always say about Fashion Sakala was he tried, he put in effort, he worked hard, and with any player, who perhaps needs a little bit more work, he had his moments of brilliance and he had his moments of absolute awfulness. I reflect on it now, and reading what I've read this morning from Fashion, and reading, and having an understanding a little bit more, and seeing him play out in Saudi. And I know Saudi is obviously a lower level, but I honestly feel that maybe now that some of the criticism I gave him was wrong, and also the fact that under Philippe Clement, could we have seen a better player, a more complete player? And it does seem that we are really missing the likes of Sakala this season. The lack of width obviously hurt us at the start of the season, thanks to Michael Beale's appalling recruitment plans over the summer. Fashion, I think, could have been someone who made a difference. I'm not saying he's a natural starter, but, impact from the bench. But it's not known, what impact Clement could have had on him. But it really is interesting what he said in this article and in this interview that he gave Michael Beale, and it actually shocked me a little bit, and it gave me new hope. And if you hang on to the end, I'll explain why it gives me new hope about this playing staff. So as we know, Fashion Sakala moved on to Al Fayha in Saudi Arabia after 2 years in Glasgow. But we read in the article that he was banished from training and cold-shouldered by Michael Beale, despite what the manager was saying. Now, the manager in press conferences, when he was asked about Fashion Sakala, talked about the closeness of his relationship with Fashion. Yet it seems that was lies. It was not true because of what Fashion is saying here. How can someone you have a close relationship with, how can someone you have a respect for be treated in the way that Fashion Sakala was treated? To me, if it was a player who has an attitude problem, a rotten apple, then yes, cold shoulder him, banish him from the training ground. Don't let him come into the training ground, because we know what effect one bad apple can have on the rest of the squad. But Fashion Sakala, under no circumstances, could be described as a bad apple. I mean, how could you describe a lad that played with a smile on his face, loved the club quite clearly, always gave his all, no matter how badly he played at times? Didn't understand the offside rule, but I'm sure it's something that could have been worked on. But then again, Cyril Dessers has less of an understanding than Fashion Sakala does of the offside rule. But look, it does kind of beg the question: is what damage Michael Beale has done to this club is further been shown by, Sakala. And what has Beale done in terms of dismantling and taking away perhaps some of assets that would have actually been useful for Philippe Clement, the likes of Antonio Cholak, who I believe should still be at the club, Yanis Hadji, and also Fashion Sakala. Now, I do know there's always that element of reinventing the wheel and rewriting history, but for me, Sakala was someone whose numbers were good, worked very hard, and had a desire to play for this club. And for me, that's half the battle. If you want to play for the club, that is half the battle. Now, Fashion in the interview said some really interesting things. He said, I went back to pre-season in Germany. It was a big surprise. My pictures were not taken. I was scoring beautiful goals and my goals were not published. I could see my friends celebrating goals when we had a team meeting. My answers were not allowed to be published. So it seems at a very early stage of last season, Sakala was beginning to be frozen out by Michael Beale, despite the performances he'd given towards the end of last season, and also I think the fact that fans did like Fashion. He said people started asking if I was there pre-season. I was there from beginning to end. It was a hard one for me to take. Even if there was a club that wanted to buy me, I could have at least been respected a little bit and leave the club in a good way. Rangers was a club, and I felt like it was my home, and receiving that treatment was so hard for me. Now, there's a number of things that I want to pick out in this comment from Fashion that upset me as a Rangers fan, that a player could be treated in this way. Like I said, if it's a player with a bad attitude or a player that has let us down frequently, time after time, I could understand him being frozen out, him being pushed out of the club. That, to some degree, is acceptable. But when it's Fashion Sakala, who I'm sure, whether you rate the guy or don't rate the guy, it was never someone who gave up, was never someone who stopped trying, was never someone who always gave his best for the club. And to hear him saying that he wasn't respected, and that he was that even though he felt like he was at home, he wasn't treated as such, it sort of breaks your heart a little bit, doesn't it? The version of events that Sakala gives are very much in contrast with what Michael Beale was saying at the time, and further call into question Michael Beale's honesty over what he did for this squad and what he was saying at the time in those press conferences. Maybe I don't know, it seems an awful thing. Sakala went on to say, that was a hard one. When I was coming back for the new season, I thought the coach would trust me and want me there for the new season. He didn't talk to me about anything or any transfers. So it came as a surprise to Fashion. He didn't expect this. He didn't understand that this was going to happen to him. Surely, if Michael Beale had that intention to want to sell him, at the end of last season, then he should have sat down with the player and talked to him and actually, sat down and said, look, Fashion, thank you for what you've done for the club, but unfortunately, I don't see you as part of my plans. To treat him as he did is pretty bloody awful. He clearly showed me that I wasn't part of his plans without telling me anything, and that's out of order to me. That is utterly out of order. The time I received a call from Mick Beale was when he told me not to come to the training ground anymore. That was hard to take for me because I didn't do anything. Players leave clubs, but they are not told not to go to the training ground. Not told to be part of the team. I stayed without training with the club for almost 2 weeks. He added as well, I think I deserved much better. I deserve to be respected at least. I understand you want to sell me to get money to buy new players. That is fine. But let me be part of the team. Let me say goodbye nicely to my teammates. When I received that call that I shouldn't go to the training ground anymore, I didn't see any of my teammates. It was hard to say goodbye in such a way to people who looked after me so well. Tavernier, Goldson, I had to talk to them on phones when it was time to leave. It was hard for them to believe that I wasn't allowed to go to the training ground anymore. Now, this to me, and this is what I want to talk about, this new hope. I think when he says there that Tav, that Goldson and the others found it hard to believe that he was forced out in such a way and he was not allowed the training ground, I think it's little surprise that the players at the start of this season are down tools and didn't want to work for Michael Beale. Quite clearly, this man had a lack of respect for people, had a lack of respect for players, had a lack of respect for people who actually cared about this club. And it's shocking. I wouldn't have picked that at all if you'd said that to me. I would have thought, nah, not Michael Beale. Yes, he's not a very good manager, but he did love Rangers, according to what we were saying. But I think it really does call into question the guy's attitude, the guy's man management skills. It really does show that as a group, even the new signings, even the players who'd come in, had probably seen the way that Fashion was treated and down tools, didn't want to play for him anymore. And as a player, why would you want to play for someone who treats an individual? And like I said, not an individual who was a bad apple, not an individual who showed a bad attitude, not an individual who didn't try, not an individual who always was slagging off the club, but an individual who tried in games, who worked hard at training, who loved the club. What message does that send to the players when that sort of person is being treated in such a god-awful way by the manager? It sends a message that no one is safe, no matter what you do. And I think that is part of the reason why these players, damn tools, didn't want to know, didn't want to try for Michael Beale. And I don't blame them to some extent. To be treated like this in the workplace, you wouldn't try. If your boss was disrespectful to you and some of your colleagues, you too would probably not want to work for that boss. And I think, the thing that gives me new hope and new belief in this squad is the fact that Philly Clement is not like that. From what every player seems to be saying, including Lundstrom and Tav and Goldson, all the experienced heads as well are saying this. The way that he works with the players, the way that he talks to the players, the way that he motivates the players, the way that he respects the players, and that he gives the players a chance, and that he will not throw them under the bus in public, and he will not treat them in a shabby way, is going to give those players a desire to play for this team. And that, for me, is good news and certainly gives me a new hope for the rest of the season. But, just on this final word on this situation with Fashion Sakala, I think Michael Beale, and I've got no reason to disbelieve Fashion. He's not the sort of person to make things up. He's not the sort of, what has he got to gain from any of this? He's got nothing to gain anymore. He has a job. He has a good salary, whatever. He's got nothing to gain from this. And like I said, he's a good Christian lad, an honest lad. We know that of Fashion. We've seen that in the past. But for him to be treated like this by Michael Beale really does show that Michael Beale is as an individual, not to be trusted, and certainly never, ever to be allowed to work as a manager again. If I was a club chairman and I read these comments from a player like Sakala, who didn't cause trouble and all the things I've said, I would not employ this man as my manager because I would be worried about what he would do to the morale of my squad. Well, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much again for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation. And as always, on the way out, 2 things for me. Number 1, smash the like. And number 2, never forget, we are